We had been together for almost 4 years. 4 years of shared dreams, late-night talks, and promises that felt so real I could almost touch them. He used to talk about our wedding like it was just around the corner, how he'd hold my hand in front of everyone and say, "She's the one." But that night on the rooftop, something in his voice felt different. The silence between us was heavy. Then he looked at me and said, "I'm just not ready for marriage right now." For a moment, I couldn't even react. My smile froze, my heart sank, and my mind started racing for an explanation that would make sense. He wasn't ready? After everything we had been through? I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe he was joking. But his eyes, they didn't carry that warmth anymore. He looked guilty. And that scared me more than his words. I asked him, quietly, "Not ready right now, or not ready ever?" He didn't answer. He just took a long breath and said, "I need some time. Things are complicated." That one line broke me in ways I can't even describe. Because I had always been patient with him, through his bad days, his insecurities, his career struggles. I thought love meant waiting. But that night, it felt like waiting was the same as losing him. After that conversation, everything changed. His texts became shorter, his calls less frequent. Our late-night talks turned into small check-ins that felt more like obligation than love. I tried to stay calm, telling myself, "It's just a phase, he'll come around." I wanted to believe that. But deep down, I knew, something had shifted. My friends noticed it before I did. They told me I was being too patient, too understanding. One of them even said, "He's preparing you for a breakup, not a wedding." I hated hearing that. Because every time I saw his name pop up on my phone, I still felt the same excitement, the same hope. I kept telling myself that he just needed space, and I could give him that. After all, love means giving people room to breathe, right? Weeks passed. We didn't fight, we didn't talk about it, we just drifted. His social media was full of parties, dinners, and trips with friends. I told myself he was just trying to distract himself. But deep inside, I felt a slow ache growing. Every time he said, "I'm busy," it felt like another door closing between us. One evening, I texted him, "Do you still see a future with me?" He took 4 hours to reply. And when he did, it was just 3 words, "I don't know." That was the first night I cried myself to sleep. Not because he said something cruel, but because he didn't say anything at all. Silence hurts more than lies sometimes. Still, I kept trying. I made excuses for him, convinced myself he was scared, not selfish. His parents had a messy divorce. He used to tell me how much it scarred him. Maybe that's why he was afraid of marriage. I told myself I'd wait, even if it took months. Because when you love someone that deeply, you don't walk away just because things get difficult. Then, 2 months later, something happened that changed everything. One of my college friends called me randomly and said, "Hey, did you see the post?" I asked, "What post?" And then she sent me a screenshot. It was a photo of him, smiling, holding another girl's hand, with the caption, "She said yes." I remember staring at my screen, not even blinking. My chest felt tight, my hands numb. I thought maybe it was fake, a misunderstanding. But when I opened his profile, it was real. My heart stopped. The same man who told me he wasn't ready for marriage, was now engaged. I didn't cry immediately. I just sat there, frozen, reading the caption over and over. She said yes. I wanted to scream, to ask him why. But no words came out. Only silence, the same silence he left me with the night he said he needed time. I don't remember how long I kept staring at that picture. The world around me just stopped. My phone screen felt heavy in my hand, my heart heavier in my chest. He looked so happy in that photo, like he'd finally found peace. And the girl beside him, she wasn't a stranger. I had seen her before. She was his coworker. The same one he once told me, "Don't worry, she's just a friend." My throat went dry. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, maybe it was some prank, maybe the caption was sarcastic. But deep down, I knew. He meant it. He really was engaged. The man who said he wasn't ready for marriage just 2 months ago was now holding someone else's hand, promising her a forever that was once meant for me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, that picture flashed in front of me. My mind replayed every conversation, every lie he ever said. Suddenly, all the excuses he made, "I'm busy, I need time, things are complicated," started to make sense. He wasn't confused. He had already chosen someone else. I was just the backup plan he didn't have the courage to let go of. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a heart that felt like it had been stepped on. I opened our old chats and started scrolling. The good mornings, the good nights, the voice notes, everything felt like a different lifetime. I typed a message, "So this is what you meant by needing time?" Then I deleted it. I didn't want to sound weak. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing he broke me. But I couldn't hold it in forever. By evening, I gave in. I texted him. Just one word, "Why?" He didn't reply that night. Not the next day either. On the third day, I finally got a message. It said, "I didn't plan for this to happen. Things just changed. I'm sorry." That was it. 3 sentences to end 4 years of love, trust, and dreams. I laughed through my tears, thinking how easily he reduced our story to a simple, "things changed." For him, maybe it was just that, a change. For me, it was destruction. Days passed, but the pain didn't. I tried to distract myself, went out with friends, watched movies, buried myself in work, but his shadow followed me everywhere. Every song, every cafe, every scent reminded me of him. I hated it. I hated that he still had that kind of power over me even after betraying me. A week later, I decided to meet him. Not to fix things, I knew they were broken beyond repair, but to end the story properly. I couldn't live with unfinished words hanging over my head. I called him, and to my surprise, he agreed to meet. We met at the same cafe where we used to sit for hours, laughing about nothing and planning our future. Only this time, there was no laughter, no warmth. Just 2 strangers pretending to be fine. He looked uncomfortable. I could tell he didn't expect me to actually show up. I didn't waste time. I asked, "Why didn't you just tell me the truth?" He looked down, then said, "Because I didn't want to hurt you." I almost laughed. "You didn't want to hurt me? And this is your version of protecting me?" My voice shook, but I didn't care. I needed to say it. He stayed silent. That silence was louder than any apology he could have given. Then he finally said, "I met her at work, things just clicked. It wasn't supposed to happen." I looked at him, the man I once thought I'd grow old with, and I couldn't recognize him anymore. His eyes didn't carry the love they used to. There was guilt, maybe, but not love. I said, "You told me you weren't ready for marriage. Turns out, you just weren't ready for marriage with me." That sentence hung in the air. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try to explain. He just whispered, "I'm sorry." I stood up, my hands trembling. "No," I said quietly, "you're not sorry. You're just relieved that I found out on my own, so you don't have to lie anymore." And then I walked away. When I got home, I cried like never before. But between the tears, there was a strange sense of closure. At least now I knew the truth. He didn't want time, he wanted someone else. The following days were hard. Every morning felt like waking up with an empty space beside me. But slowly, the pain turned into realization. I started seeing how much I had ignored the signs, the distance, the excuses, the way he stopped looking at me like he used to. Love had made me blind, but heartbreak made me see everything clearly. I deleted his number, his photos, and all the memories I could erase. Some nights I still checked his profile, only to torture myself a little more. But each time, the sting lessened. I began to understand that his betrayal wasn't a reflection of my worth, it was a reflection of his weakness. It took me weeks to smile again, months to stop replaying that moment in my head. But eventually, I did. I started doing things just for myself, painting, reading, walking by the beach. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a text, or a call, or a "sorry." One day, while scrolling through my phone, I came across that same engagement photo again, the one that once shattered me. But this time, I didn't cry. I just stared at it and whispered to myself, "She said yes. But I'm the one who got saved." And in that moment, I finally felt free. When I found out he was engaged, it didn't hit me all at once. At first, I just stared at my phone screen, confused. I kept refreshing the post, thinking maybe it was a joke or some misunderstanding. But no, it was real. There he was, smiling brighter than I'd seen in years, standing next to her, his fiancée. My chest tightened as I read the caption, "Forever begins now." My forever had ended, but his was just starting, with someone else. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory in my head like a movie stuck on repeat. Every time he said he wasn't ready for marriage, every time he promised, one day. All of it suddenly felt like a lie. I tried to convince myself that he must have changed, that maybe he was finally ready now, just not for me. But that thought hurt more than anything. The next morning, I deleted his pictures. I told myself it would make me feel better, that I was moving on. But when I reached our last photo, the one where he kissed my forehead on my birthday, my fingers froze. My eyes burned with tears, and I couldn't press delete. I locked my phone instead and cried until I fell asleep. Days turned into weeks, but my mind kept going back to that post. I'd open Instagram without thinking, scroll for a while, and somehow end up on his profile again. I'd tell myself it was the last time, but it never was. Each photo looked like a reminder that he built a new life without me, and he seemed happy in it. It wasn't the fact that he moved on that broke me, it was how easily he did it. The man who once said he couldn't even imagine his mornings without hearing my voice now looked perfectly fine holding someone else's hand. I kept wondering what changed. Was it her smile? Her timing? Or maybe she was just lucky to meet him when he was finally ready. One evening, I met up with a close friend who knew us both. I tried acting casual, but my voice shook when I asked, "Did he ever talk about me after we broke up?" She looked down for a moment, then said softly, "He said you were amazing, but he didn't want to keep hurting you. He said you deserved better." I let out a small laugh, not because it was funny, but because it sounded so absurd. He didn't want to hurt me, yet he did exactly that. I tried to brush it off, but I felt my throat tighten. My friend reached out and held my hand, saying, "You'll move on too." I wanted to believe her, but deep down, I didn't want to move on. Not yet. Then one night, I saw their pre-wedding photos. It was like someone had punched me in the stomach. I stared at them, both glowing with joy, the kind of happiness I used to dream of having with him. That was the night I finally understood, he wasn't coming back. I sat alone in my room for hours, scrolling through our old chats, reading the messages where he said he couldn't live without me. My eyes stopped at one text he sent a year ago: "I am not ready for marriage yet, but when I am, it'll be you." I stared at it for a long time, then deleted the whole chat. It felt like closing a door I should have closed long ago. The next morning, I blocked him. Not out of anger, but because I needed peace. I didn't want to keep reopening a wound that clearly wasn't meant to heal with him in my life. I muted his friends, deleted mutual contacts, and decided to start fresh. For a while, it felt strange waking up without checking my phone for his messages. But slowly, that silence began to feel comforting. I started focusing on myself again, reading, journaling, going on long walks in the evening. I even joined a photography class I'd been putting off for years. It wasn't an overnight recovery, but every small step felt like a little piece of me coming back to life. Of course, there were bad days too. Some nights I'd lie awake wondering if he ever thought about me, if he ever felt guilty, or if I had really meant something to him at all. But then I realized, even if he didn't, it didn't matter. Because I did, I felt deeply, loved honestly, and gave my best. That's something to be proud of, not ashamed of. Weeks later, out of nowhere, I got a message from an unknown number. It was him. "Hey, how have you been?" My heart skipped a beat. I stared at the message for minutes before replying, "I've been fine. Congratulations on your engagement." He replied, "Thanks. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." I almost laughed. After everything, now he wanted to make sure I was okay? I typed out a long message, every thought, every pain, every why that had haunted me, but then I deleted it all. I simply wrote, "I'm doing better now." He sent back one word, "Good." And that was it. No closure, no explanations, just silence after that. But somehow, that silence felt like closure enough. It was the first time I didn't cry after talking to him. It was the first time I felt free. Months have passed since then. Sometimes I still think about him, not with anger, not even sadness. Just acceptance. He was a chapter in my story, not the whole book. Now when I see couples, I don't feel bitterness anymore. I feel hope. Because I've learned that love doesn't end when someone leaves, it just changes shape. It becomes strength, patience, and wisdom. He said he wasn't ready for marriage, and maybe he really wasn't ready for me. And that's okay. Because now, I'm ready. Ready to be happy. Time has a strange way of healing you without asking for permission. You don't even realize it's happening. One day, you wake up and the pain doesn't hit you like before. The world still looks the same, but something inside you has quietly shifted. That's how it was for me. Months passed since his wedding, and I finally reached a place where I could talk about him without feeling my heart crack open. I still remembered everything, his laugh, his way of speaking, the little quirks that made me love him, but the memories no longer hurt. They just existed. Like old photographs kept in a drawer. I started enjoying my own company again. I'd go to coffee shops alone, sit by the window, and watch people passing by. It was peaceful. I realized how much of myself I'd lost in trying to keep someone else. I used to think love meant giving everything you had until you had nothing left. But now, I understood, love should never cost you yourself. Sometimes, I'd imagine bumping into him somewhere. What would I say? Would I smile? Would I feel that old rush again? But deep down, I knew that even if that moment ever came, I wouldn't be the same person he once knew. I'd grown. I'd changed. I'd learned that closure isn't something another person gives you, it's something you create for yourself. One day, I got invited to a friend's wedding. I hesitated at first. I didn't want to sit there watching another love story unfold while mine had ended so painfully. But something inside me said, "Go. You're stronger now." So, I did. It was a beautiful outdoor wedding, fairy lights, music, people laughing, the smell of flowers in the air. At first, I felt out of place, watching couples holding hands and whispering to each other. But then, unexpectedly, I found myself smiling. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't jealous. I wasn't bitter. I was simply happy for them. As the night went on, I started talking to people, laughing, even dancing a little. That's when I met him, not him, but someone new. His name was Ian. He was calm, gentle, with a kind of warmth that made conversations easy. We talked for hours, not about love or heartbreak, but about life, our dreams, our fears, the little things that made us who we were. He didn't know anything about my past, and I didn't feel the need to explain. For once, I wasn't defined by what I'd lost. I was just me. After that night, Ian and I started talking more often. It wasn't like before, there were no grand gestures, no promises. It was slow, steady, and real. He'd ask me how my day went, and he actually listened. He'd make me laugh, but also respect my silence when I didn't feel like talking. One evening, while we were sitting at a cafe, he asked softly, "Have you ever been in love?" I paused. I could have told him everything, about the heartbreak, the engagement, the nights I cried myself to sleep. But instead, I smiled and said, "Yes. And I've learned a lot from it." He nodded, as if he understood without needing the details. That's when I realized something important. Love doesn't always come wrapped in passion or promises. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, when you've stopped looking for it. Weeks went by, and though Ian and I never labeled what we had, it felt good, peaceful, uncomplicated. I wasn't trying to fill an emptiness anymore. I was simply sharing the space I'd finally built within myself. One night, as I was journaling, I wrote something that I'll never forget. He said he wasn't ready for marriage. Maybe he wasn't ready for the kind of love I had to give. But maybe he prepared me for the one who would be. That realization brought a sense of peace I'd been chasing for months. I wasn't angry at my past anymore. I was grateful. Because every heartbreak, every tear, had led me here, to a stronger, wiser version of myself. A few days later, I ran into someone unexpected, his cousin. We talked for a bit, catching up on old times. Before leaving, he said, "You know, he talks about you sometimes. He says you were the one who truly cared for him." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I just smiled politely and replied, "I hope he's happy." And I meant it. I genuinely did. That night, I sat on my balcony, looking at the stars, and felt a quiet kind of closure wash over me. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic, it was calm, almost like a whisper from the universe saying, "You did well. It's time to move forward." I took out my phone, opened our old chat, and finally deleted it, not out of anger this time, but because I didn't need to hold on anymore. My story with him had ended long ago, and I was ready to write a new one. A few weeks later, Ian surprised me with something simple but beautiful, a handwritten note. It said, "I don't know where this will go, but I'm glad I met you. You feel like peace after a storm." I didn't realize I was crying until a tear fell on the paper. Not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. Because for the first time, I felt seen, understood, and valued. Love didn't come back in the way I once imagined. It didn't bring grand confessions or poetic apologies. It came quietly, softly, through someone who didn't need to fix me, because I had already fixed myself. And maybe that's what true healing looks like, not waiting for someone to come back, but becoming the kind of person who no longer needs them to. Today, when I look back, I don't see a failed love story. I see growth. I see lessons. I see strength. Because if he hadn't left, I would have never discovered who I really was when I stood alone. He said he wasn't ready for marriage, and maybe he wasn't. But life had other plans. It wasn't about who he was ready for, it was about who I was becoming. Now, when I see my reflection in the mirror, I don't see the girl who was waiting for someone to choose her. I see a woman who finally chose herself. And honestly, that's the best love story I've ever known. Days passed, but the ache inside me didn't fade. You know how sometimes you think time will heal everything? Well, it doesn't. It only teaches you how to hide the pain better. I started focusing on work, trying to fill every empty space of my day with something, anything, that could distract me. My friends told me I should move on, that I deserved better. I smiled, nodded, and agreed. But deep inside, I knew that a part of me was still waiting for him to text, to call, to say that he made a mistake. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart skipped a beat. And every time it wasn't him, I felt the same dull sting in my chest. I wasn't angry at him anymore. I was angry at myself, for believing him, for trusting his words when his actions screamed otherwise. He said he wasn't ready for marriage, but what he truly wasn't ready for was me. Because when someone truly wants you, they'll be ready for anything. One night, I came across his wedding pictures on social media. The same man who said marriage wasn't for him was now standing in a sherwani, smiling like he had found the meaning of love. His new bride looked radiant, and they looked perfect. That word hit me hard, perfect. Because for months, I had tried to be perfect for him. I had twisted myself in ways I didn't even recognize just to fit into the version he wanted. But in the end, it wasn't enough. For days, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, what did she have that I didn't? Was it timing? Was it something about me? Or maybe he just never loved me the way I loved him. That's the thing about heartbreak, it makes you question your worth, your value, your everything. But slowly, through all the sleepless nights and tear-stained pillows, I started realizing something. Maybe it wasn't about me being unworthy. Maybe it was about me being too much for someone who wasn't ready to handle it. One day, I bumped into his cousin at a cafe. She didn't recognize me at first, but when she did, her face softened. We talked for a bit, exchanged the usual polite small talk. And then, she said something that hit me like a wave. "You know," she said, "he got engaged just a month after you two broke up." Everyone was shocked. Even his mom said he rushed into it. I smiled faintly, pretending it didn't matter, but inside, my mind was spinning. So he didn't just find love, he chose to move on fast. Maybe he needed to prove something. Maybe he wanted to escape the version of himself that hurt me. When I reached home that night, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. I didn't look broken anymore. Just different. Stronger, maybe. I realized that heartbreak changes you, it doesn't destroy you, it reshapes you. I had spent months wondering why he wasn't ready to marry me, but never once asked myself why I was ready to marry him. Because love had made me blind to everything else. I wanted forever with a man who wasn't even sure about tomorrow. Weeks later, he texted me. A simple message, "Hey, I hope you're doing well." My hands trembled. I stared at the screen for a long time, the same way I used to wait for his messages before. For a second, I wanted to reply. I wanted to ask him why. Why he said he wasn't ready. Why he broke me just to go build a life with someone else. But then I realized, none of his answers could undo the pain. None of his words could make up for what he took from me. So I just locked my phone, smiled to myself, and whispered, "I'm better now." That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months. Because I finally accepted that closure doesn't always come from the other person, it comes from within you. It comes the day you stop replaying the old memories and start creating new ones for yourself. Months passed, and I started to laugh again, to live again. I met new people, traveled to new places, and started writing. Funny how pain turns you into a storyteller. I started writing about heartbreak, healing, and self-worth. And every time I wrote, I felt like I was piecing myself back together. One day, while scrolling through social media, I saw his wedding anniversary post. This time, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I just felt nothing. That's when I knew I had truly moved on. I had stopped carrying the weight of someone who had already put me down long ago. I realized that sometimes, people leave not because you are hard to love, but because they don't know how to love deeply. Maybe he wasn't lying when he said he wasn't ready for marriage. Maybe he was only ready for the version of love that didn't demand growth or change. And that's okay. We were two different people, on two different journeys. But I also learned something beautiful through all this. When someone says they're not ready, don't try to convince them otherwise. Don't beg for their love, don't wait for them to change. Because if they truly saw your worth, they would never risk losing you. Now, when I look back, I don't see failure, I see freedom. Freedom from a love that wasn't meant to last. Freedom from the idea that someone else's choice defines my worth. I'm not bitter anymore. In fact, I'm grateful. Because his "I am not ready" pushed me toward becoming someone who's not afraid to love herself first. Love doesn't always end with two people walking into the sunset together. Sometimes, it ends quietly, with a girl realizing she deserves more than half-hearted promises. And when that realization finally sinks in, it doesn't hurt anymore, it liberates you. Today, I'm happy. Genuinely happy. And no, it's not because I found someone new. It's because I found myself. The girl who once cried over a man's indecision now smiles knowing she was never the problem. She was just the lesson he couldn't handle. So, if you re-listening to this and you've ever been in my place, if someone once told you they weren't ready, and then gave their heart to someone else, remember this, it wasn't rejection, it was redirection. You were being guided towards something better, something real, something that won't make you beg for clarity or commitment. Because one day, you'll meet someone who is ready. Ready for your chaos, your calm, your softness, your strength. And when that happens, you'll understand why the others never worked out. Until then, be patient with your heart. Heal slowly. And never forget, you are not too much for the right person. You are exactly enough.